My name is Brianna Costilow. I'm a senior in the Early Childhood Education Department in Wheelock, and my project was looking at the historical perspective on the perception of tattoos within the United States. So my motivation and my background largely comes from my dad, who's pictured on the left. He has a lot of tattoos, as you can see. Those are some of his tattoos. He travels for tattoos, and he pays a lot of money for tattoos. He also got tattooed by some people on Ink Master, which is a tattoo reality competition show that I grew up watching with him. So that's kind of where my interest stems from. But tattooing in general originated with indigenous ancient origins. So a lot of native and cultural tattoos are very popular around the world. And there are a lot of traditions associated with it, and even therapeutic medicines. So therapeutic tattooing, sort of like acupuncture nowadays. So as sailors in the later 18th century and mid-19th century traveled across the world and were exposed to these, they got some themselves or came back with tales. So people got interested, which led to the carnival era, where we have tattooed freaks and carnival shows with tattooed people. And this was when tattoos were kind of a social spectacle. People were really interested in tattoos after a while, and it was further pushed by Samuel O'Reilly's invention of the electric tattoo machine, which is on the far right, in 1891, which was modified off of Thomas Edison's electric pen from 1876. So as more people were getting tattoos, these tattooed freaks were out of business. So this is when we got to the working class era. It's known as the working class era because a lot of members of the working class were getting tattoos. A lot of military men, as well as just men in general who are in the working class, were the ones getting tattoos. Tattoo shops were in impoverished and crime-ridden areas typically. And this is also when we got the American traditional style of tattooing, which is in the top right, which was a predominant style of tattooing within the United States for a while. So then, post-World War II, these military men come back to a changed world, and they're a little bit upset. People are generally upset. There was a lot of cultural revolution at the time. So this is when you get the rebels. So the biker gangs, you have a lot of youth subcultures, the mods, the rockabillys, the greasers who are getting tattoos, and tattoos were now a group affiliation. It was no longer a freak situation, and it was no longer a patriotic identity. So this is where we kind of get the criminal association with tattoos. But then the tattoo renaissance came along, mostly by the top right man, Ed Hardy. He was a prominent figure. You might have heard of him. He went to art school, and so tattoos no longer were flash designs, which were pre-drawn images that people kind of went up and chose from. You could now collaborate with an artist who was trained in and had an artistic background to have something that spoke to your personal identity. So this is when tattoos became a sort of personal identity symbol, similar to what the punks kind of preached back in the day, because they're all about radical individualism. So this is now where your tattoos meant something as a personal form of your identity, and the tattoo renaissance itself, the class and gender lines were blurring, and so we had a lot more people and all different kinds of people getting tattooed rather than the typical military men or working class men. Tattoos were further perpetuated by media, largely MTV back in the day, because visual identity was very important in advertising for different artists. So on the top left, we have Janis Joplin and Ozzy Osbourne, and then the bottom left, we have on the far left, Tommy Lee, who's the drummer of Motley Crue. And then that's morphed in today. So you might notice some of the people up there, Harry Styles, Miley Cyrus, Post Malone, have all famous tattoos. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's tattoos have even have a cultural identity. So those cultural tattoos still exist today, and they're still very prominent. And it's even bleeding into kids' media with characters like the ones in Moana, and largely in professional sports. So 50% of NBA is tattooed, and it's very common amongst professional athletes to be tattooed. So more people are seeing it in all different forms. So today, tattoos are largely seen as an art form. The body is a canvas, and it's really about your personal identity, what you choose, and sometimes it's even just about what you like and what you choose to wear, almost like a fashion choice, but a more permanent one. And so these are just a lot of different kinds of tattoo styles, and so it's no longer really kept to one style. It's about the artist and the person who are getting them, and it's no longer one person. It's people of all genders, all social classes, all races that are getting tattoos. It's no longer that kind of focused in person who's getting a tattoo. So my biggest point of contention today with tattoos or in the workplace, there's still a lot of discrimination, particularly in corporate America in the workplace with tattoos. There's a general aura of rebellion and sort of that criminal sense that came from the rebel era that it's associated with tattoos that makes employers somewhat hesitant, and there are no laws currently in the United States that protect people with tattoos against discrimination, so you can totally not be hired just because of that. So this is something I hope that will change in the future, because I think it's definitely morphed towards an art form and as as a form of personal identity, but we're still seeing problems today. So I think as media continues to disseminate the image of tattoos and as it becomes a more recognized media across all different types of people and all different careers, I think that it will be more accepted. So thank you.
Great job, Brianna. You did such a wonderful descriptive job of looking historically at all these different phases, but one of the things that's really interesting that came out of that is that, of course, each of these seemingly contradictory interpretations, sort of symbolic meanings of tattoos, can coexist and do kind of coalesce now. So this really interesting kind of simultaneity of tattoos being an emblem of collective identity, whether through military or through gangs or through other cultural formations, and a way of identifying you as a member of a group, and at the same time, a mark of individual distinctiveness, that the kind of ways in which you said this is a mark of personal preference, personal identity. And so you've described that, but how do you interpret that? How can a tattoo, as a form, contain so many and simultaneously so many of these seemingly very different versions of what it is and what it stands for?
Yeah, well, I feel like as I spoke about more the modern view, it is a form of art. So with any art, it can be highly individualistic to the artists themselves. It can be applied to a lot of different cultures. People can interpret through their own personal lens. So I think that in its existence as like an art form, with those different interpretations, it can kind of blend in these different areas and just kind of be a symbol of art for different people in all different ways, which is kind of the beauty of art in general and kind of the beauty of tattooing, especially when people get to blend their stories and their personal identity in the mix. So yeah, I just think from its basis of kind of being an art form that it's kind of able to blend those lines and they're kind of able to coexist. And I will say that there are tattooing that is kind of more hate groups and that sort of thing. And so they're actually programs that help people get rid of those and that sort of thing. But that was, you just reminded me, because that's a sort of blending that can occur that some people don't really want anymore, or that's really not ideal because tattoos are permanent. So, and it's not really nice to be hateful, so.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. My question is a bit personal, so if you don't feel comfortable to answer, I understand. But I'm curious if you have tattoos, and like if you do, what significance they hold for you.
Yeah, I currently have, I think, 5 tattoos. I put on a large fake one just for the sort of a social experiment, because I think the Keystone in general and Kilachand in general has this sort of like aura, this like we're supposed to be business casual, and there's like this kind of corporate realm. So I almost wore a neck tattoo to see kind of how people would react, but I didn't. I chose against it, so I went for the arm one instead. And that might speak to my own personal kind of views, but yeah, I have. I recently got this cat one. I love cats, and I have a back piece. I have a signature from my great aunt, who's like my grandma. So they kind of all have different meanings. I have two from Montreal, that a trip I went on from artists I like. My personal viewpoint is I just really like tattoos as the artist being able to choose. So I prefer flash and just being like, I like your style. I think it's so cool. I would love that on me, and as opposed to me being like, can we make this? So in the future, I hope to have kind of like a lot of different artists and just be like, yeah, this is this person's art, and I connect to it in this way, but I have it on my body now. So yeah, that's kind of my personal story, I guess.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question about your tattoos in the media slide. You you showed several pictures of celebrities with tattoos, and they're sort of covered in tattoos. But one of the people, the celebrities you noted as being like as perpetuating the popularity of tattoos was Janis Joplin. And when you look at Janis Joplin, she sort of stands out amongst the others as only having like 2 tattoos, and they're relatively small. So I was wondering if in your research or just in your opinion, there's a reason why she's often touted as perpetuating popularity of tattoos, even though her tattoos are small.
Yeah, it was during a time where I think it was in the 70s, where there weren't a lot of tattoos in the media, and she was also a woman getting tattoos. And being small, and she kind of just had one that looked kind of like a bracelet. I think it was a smaller, more acceptable and respectful, and possibly even more classic, timeless kind of tattoo that more people could identify with, rather than a big covering of tattoos in all different colors and forms. So I think it was just a more approachable, that reached a broader audience because it wasn't so in your face and covered. So yeah.
Hi. So I had a question just about, you mentioned that some of the tattoos are cultural and some of them are not, that are just kind of like freedom of expression. And in terms of workplace discrimination, obviously cultural tattoos and things like that, like Jason Momoa has, or other, like especially Southeast Polynesian, Asian cultural groups have, you could say that in the workplace they can't be discriminated against for having those because it's a cultural aspect of their identity. But how do you see the movement of just like personal tattoos, and like do you see the movement going somewhere soon? I know that there's a lot of people in even corporate jobs now that have very colorfully dyed hair, which is really great to see like how that progresses. But how do you think the defense for personal tattoos will be like in the corporate and especially medical world?
So I'm not too sure about medical in particular. I will say that approximately 3 out of 4 employers are accepting of tattoos nowadays, and approximately 40% of people ages 18 to 34 in the United States have a tattoo. So it's definitely becoming more popular because it was 3% back in the 80s. So I think as more people are just getting tattoos, there are still employers that are accepting of these different forms, but I still know personally of people that have to cover up their tattoos at work and that sort of thing. But I think in general there's been a shift towards more acceptance and being able to show it. But it's hard to say when that total shift would happen, because there are definitely industries like maybe finance that it might be more looked down upon as opposed to someone who's working in a corporate level at an entertainment industry sort of job. So it's hard to say, but it looks to be like it's moving in a good direction if you like tattoos. So thank you.